Hello, my name's Carl James. I'm the author of the Truth Seeker's Guide website and the recently published 2016 edition of the book Science Fiction and the Hidden Global Agenda. In this video I'm going to be speaking about 9/11 and specifically the film trilogy Back to the Future. Of all the films to contain symbolism and themes relating to 9/11, none have been scrutinised more closely than the Back to the Future trilogy, particularly Part 1 of the film series. Numerous scenes and sections of dialogue appear to allude to the events of that day, often in combination with curious symbolism and on-screen appearances of the numbers 9 and 11. The key 9/11 allusions in Part 1 of the film trilogy appear predominantly, but not exclusively, in several pivotal story sections. The first section takes place at the Twin Pines Mall in the early hours of October 26, 1985. The name of the mall is analogous with the Twin Towers. When Marty McFly arrives at the mall, the time on the clock is 1:16, which is an inverted 9/11. The sign carries the moniker Twin Pines Mall and two pine tree shapes. When the sign is inverted, as with the aforementioned time of 1:16, the tree shapes on the sign are loosely analogous with the iconic shapes of the World Trade Center Twin Towers, cast on the New York skyline. I should note that Marty comes directly to the mall from his home on Leon Estates, the entrance to which is flanked by two concrete pillars. Marty arrives and becomes witness to a time travel experiment being carried out by his friend Doc Brown. Doc unveils his time machine, which emerges from the back of a van. The twin ramps which descend from the tailgate of the van are reminiscent of the Twin Towers. The first thing that Doc does is to synchronise the experiment stopwatch with his control watch. The time on both of these watches is 1:19, another quasi-inverted 9/11. Marty and Doc come under attack from Muslim terrorists, whose plutonium the Doc has stolen as part of his experiment. This inclusion of Middle Eastern terrorists is notable in the context of 9/11. However, remember that terrorists only equate to the official narrative or the cover story of 9/11, not to the evidence indicating a wholly different scenario on 9/11, such as the use of directed free energy technology at the World Trade Center complex, but I'll come to that issue again shortly. Doc Brown is shot dead by Muslim terrorists, and Marty leaps into the DeLorean hoping to make an escape. His speedy getaway triggers the time machine and sends Marty back in time to November, the 11th month of the year, 1955. Marty appears on the Twin Pines farm of Old Man Peabody. This land is the future site of the Twin Pines Mall. Marty accidentally drives over one of Peabody's prized twin baby pine trees, which changes the future name of the mall to Lone Pines Mall. Combining this with 9/11 analogies in the previous scenes at the mall, one could argue that the loss of the first pine tree is the metaphorical destruction of the first Twin Tower on 9/11. Furthermore, the remaining lone pine is also analogous with the so-called Freedom Tower, One World Trade Center, that generically replaced the World Trade Center towers. On the subject of pine trees, I just want to take a moment to look at the etymology of the word pine. As a noun, pine originated from pin in Old French and pinus in Latin. These words ultimately refer to jutting points, peaks, promontory or pinnacle, meaning highest point. In architectural terms, pinnacle is an upright member, usually ending in a spire. Another use of the word pine comes from the Old English pinion. The Dutch pinion and the German Peinen, these words were used to describe pain, expressed, experienced or inflicted, and were all based on the Latin word pena, meaning punishment. Marty subsequently arrives in 1955 Hill Valley Town Square, where the Texaco garage sells gasoline for 19.5 cents. The 1985 Texaco garage is previously seen selling gasoline for $1.09, unleaded gasoline for $1.19. The station is complete with a sign saying Gas War. The 1955 Town Square record shop advertises the latest hits, The Ballad of Davy Crockett and 16 Tons, another inverted 9-1. The Western Auto Store has a glowing 9 arrow as its outdoor sign. It's worth noting the esoteric significance of Marty's arrival on the 5th of November 1955, 555. a 3-digit number with huge occult and Masonic significance. The number is also part of Jennifer Parker's telephone number beneath the I love you note to Marty McFly. This is not unusual in and of itself, as the code is a key and common part of American telephone number system. However, it's written on the reverse of a Save the Clock Tower flyer, the same flyer that gives Marty key information about the yet-to-happen Hill Valley lightning storm when he is trapped in 1955. Whilst we're in this occult esoteric territory, one of the 1985 town square shops has a Masonic pyramid and an all-seeing eye as its logo. Incidentally, it's only seen once when Marty first receives the Save the Clock Tower flyer. The 1955 town sign, and the hovering town sign in part 2 of the film trilogy for that matter, includes the logos of several sun worship Masonic-related organisations around it. The most prominent business to continue to appear in the scenes at the Twin Pines Mall is the J.C. Penney store. The founder of this business chain was James Cash Penney, a 33rd degree Freemason of both the Scottish and York rites. There are multiple references to the Masonic number 33 in the film trilogy. This may also extend to the occult mirroring or inversion of 33, and thus giving us an added layer of importance to the key 88 miles per hour motif in the film. In a 2014 interview with Veritas Radio, historian, writer, researcher and 32nd degree Freemason Robert W. Sullivan IV gave some thoughts on the Masonic sun worship symbolism in Back to the Future.
Of course, 10:04, this is the time of the lightning strike. This is drilled into your head ad nauseum in the movie, that the lightning is going to hit the clock tower at 10:04. This is an esoteric solar reference. 10:04 is a reference to the date of October 4th, which is the 265th day, the 265th day of the year, I want to say, which means there are 88 days left in the year. This is why the DeLorean has to hit 88 miles to activate the sun chariot, invest it with the solar symbolism to transport Horus back to the future.
There are repeated allusions to trauma-based mind control in the film series, such as the blunt force head traumas that both Doc and Marty suffer at multiple points in the 3 films. Rainbow symbolism, Hellbit symbolism, such as when 1955 Doc is first shown wearing his mind-reading apparatus, and the birdcage bluebird symbolism, such as the Bluebird Motel sign, which appears at a key point in Part 1 of the trilogy. Project Bluebird is believed to have been a CIA-led 1951 to 1953 precursor to Project Monarch mind control research. To see a collection of images highlighting the esoteric symbolism in the Back to the Future trilogy, I suggest checking out the website Hollywood Subliminals. The location of the town square is the town clock, another lone tower, and the location of another pivotal 9/11 related section of the film. On Saturday the 12th of November 1955, Doc Brown harnesses electrical energy from a lightning strike to the clock tower to power the flux capacitor of the DeLorean time machine. This section of the film appears to be bookmarked by a scene immediately before, when George McFly checks the time and dashes out of the Enchantment Under the Sea dance at 9 p.m. When we see Doc Brown attaching a wire cable from the clock tower, which leads down to the street below, collecting twin lampposts, pillars maybe, Marty drives the DeLorean, outfitted with a connection hook, towards the lightning-charged cable and travels back to his own time of 1985. When the DeLorean disappears into the future, it leaves twin fire trails resembling 11. This shot aligns the fire trails to the right of the neon-lit 9 sign of the Western Auto Shop. The framing of this shot effectively fills the screen with a glowing 911. Additionally, the movie theatre at the end of the street has 4 blue neon beams above the roof pointing skyward. The colour and alignment of these beams is reminiscent of the light being shot up from the former site of the World Trade Center Twin Towers in remembrance of the lives lost on 9/11. The DeLorean would have crashed into the movie theatre if it had not time travelled. Indeed, it does this upon arriving in 1985. This is a subtle foreshadowing of the cartoon physics demonstrated by the vehicles that appear to pass into the Twin Towers on 9/11. Marty's arrival in 1985 disturbs a tramp who is sleeping on top of a cardboard box-laden bench. The main cardboard box is noticeably hanging from the bench and has the serial number DS910. Throughout the whole section of this film, Marty repeatedly tries to warn Doc about his future death at the hands of terrorists on October 26, 1985. When Marty makes his last attempt to warn Doc, the clock tower shows a prominent allusion to 9/11. The hour hand is positioned at the end of the 9th hour, just short of 10, and the minute hand is positioned at the end of the 11th hour. Marty shouts, "I have to tell you about the future." Marty's arrival date of October 26, 1985 is also a curious date. Exactly 16, another inverted 9 and 1, years later, to the day, October 26, 2001, the United States passed the history-changing Patriot Act into law as a direct result of 9/11 and the perceived threats from terrorism. In the film, on October 25, 1985, Marty tells his head teacher, Mr. Strickland, that history is going to change. On the same day, Marty encounters a volunteer handing out leaflets to save the clock tower, effectively giving him history-changing knowledge. Much of what I've covered so far in this section has been discussed for a while by a number of internet-based researchers. Some of these researchers have even published articles and produced videos examining the subject. One of the most well-known of these is the video Back to the Future Predicts 9/11. The creator of this video, Joe Alexander, filmmaker and member of the synchronistic community, has a YouTube channel under the moniker Barely Human 11, where he has theorised about other synchronistic connections with the Back to the Future trilogy, such as the JFK assassination, the Roswell incident, and ancient mythology. However, Alexander's Back to the Future Predicts 9/11 video has seemingly taken the internet by storm. Posted in July 2015, the video garnered just short of 2 million views in a mere 4 months, and was promoted, for better or worse, by a myriad of high-profile internet sources. Not to take anything away from this video, I'm always a little guarded when it comes to rapid internet success stories and things that go viral on YouTube. If nothing else, the timing of the release of Alexander's video seemed to help bolster its popularity. Posted as it was a few months before October 21st, 2015, the worldwide Back to the Future Day and the 30th anniversary of the first film. In an August 2015 interview, Joe Alexander described the video as having 2 main components to it. The first is the sub-narrative of Back to the Future, and the second is the power that the film has to influence the human mind and to paint reality in a different light. More human minds on planet Earth observed 9/11 than any single event in human history, making it a massive terrestrial meditation concentrating collective consciousness on a single space-time focal point, making 9/11 humanity's most potent consciousness-altering stargate. The main points of discussion in Alexander's video include a sudden surprise terrorist attack perpetrated by a group of Muslim terrorists. At the Twin Pines Mall, comparisons between the Twin Pines and the Twin Towers, and some of the numerical 9s and 11s, such as those I previously discussed in Back to the Future amongst other things. One of the most curious aspects raised in Alexander's video is the synchronicity between Back to the Future trilogy's writer and director Robert Zemeckis and his 2015 film, The Walk. The Walk is a biographical drama film based on the story of French high-wire artist Philippe Petit's walk between the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center on August 7, 1974. This film had a planned release date of October 21st, 2015, the same date that Doc and Marty visit the future in Back to the Future 2, and as I mentioned before, the 30th anniversary of the first film and the worldwide Back to the Future Day. For whatever reason, the film's US general release was ultimately brought forward to October the 9th, 2015, with the IMAX 3D version appearing shortly before on September the 30th, 2015. Joe Alexander's video also looks at Back to the Future Part 2 and the scene screen projector scene in Marty's 2015 home. The screen shows various landscapes and vistas, including one of a picturesque garden with twin pine trees, and another of the New York skyline complete with the Twin Towers, central to the foreground. The living room also contains a large lamp modelled on the upper section of the New York Statue of Liberty. Alexander proposes that the faulty scene screen projector combined with the upside-down perspective of George McFly gives the audience a depiction of the Twin Towers, in his words, falling down. It's an interesting choice of words, not mine. Some observers have suggested that George McFly's position is analogous to the infamous falling man captured on film during the events of 9/11. Alexander also proposes that Zemeckis' film The Walk is the synchronistic reveal of the 9/11 symbolism in the Back to the Future films. Synchronicities with falling, as in falling towers, jet planes, terrorism, are also drawn in the article 9/11 Synchro-Mysticism on Back to the Future 1, 2 and 3, Part 1. In the article, it states, getting back to the twin theme, Marty gets busted for being involved in an illegal scheme while wearing twin ties, and shortly after that the twins fall, old and young Jennifer. Right after going back to 1985, they nearly get hit by a jet plane. And then when Marty tries to resume his normal life in what he thought was a nice safe home he once knew, he's chased out by another bunch of people telling him, we ain't gonna be terrorised. The aforementioned videos and articles are fascinating, detailed, and point out many important clues of relevance. However, I'm slightly concerned by the tonal trend that I've noticed appearing in such pieces, particularly regarding perceptions of the reality of 9/11. Whilst these kinds of pieces acknowledge to some small degree that 9/11 was not as the official narrative ports, the points of connection in relation to 9/11 seem to centre on Muslim terrorist themes, fires, intense heat, explosions, references to nuclear mechanisms, ground zero, attacks, jet planes striking the towers, and the continual assertion that the Twin Towers collapsed or fell down. To demonstrate, see how many of these terms you can pick out from this section of narration dialogue from the Back to the Future Predicts 9/11 video, where Joe Alexander discusses the scene screen section from Back to the Future Part 2. He says, "This scene is a secret recreation of the New York City, where Marty's family has gathered to stare at Ground Zero. Of these three characters staring at Ground Zero, one of them is completely upside down. The hint being given here is to observe the scene from this perspective by turning it upside down. When doing so, the Twin Towers are clearly shown falling down. In the entire history of cinema, this scene of Back to the Future is the most literal depiction ever made, showing the Twin Towers falling down. So how is it possible that this scene would have occurred in a story that already contained a terrorist attack by Muslims at the Twins on 9/11, where the Twins are the Twin Towers, but then executed Hollywood's best depiction of the Twin Towers collapse? But Back to the Future doesn't just portray this attack, it develops into an elaborate warning about it. My own research shows that while some people have been swept up in the use of certain 9/11 terminology, failing to recognise the implications of its use, there are many individuals in the so-called 9/11 truth movement who deliberately use such terms to muddle and misdirect 9/11 research. For example, saying that the Twin Towers collapsed or fell down is misleading, given that they actually largely turned to dust in mid-air. Whilst I'm currently uncertain if this is a deliberate misuse of terminology amongst those people connecting the dots between Back to the Future film franchise and 9/11, I do wonder why they have yet to analyse the following other synchronicities in the Back to the Future films. Number 1. Looks like an aeroplane. This relates to the notion of jet planes hitting the Twin Towers on 9/11, and the question of whether or not the aircraft seen on that day were actually alternative vehicles to those commercial airlines alleged to have impacted the towers. My personal position on this subject, based on the widely varying witness testimony, anomalies in the recorded footage of the impacts, the damage caused, and the physics involved, is that these aircraft were not as initially perceived, and probably deployed some form of camouflage disguise system so as to appear like conventional jetliners. This would explain a great many of the impact anomalies, including the seeming disappearance or melting of the aircraft into the surface of the towers. In Back to the Future Part 1, when the DeLorean crashes into Old Man Peabody's barn, the vehicle drives through an open door. The next scene shows the DeLorean stationary with a barn wall behind it. No open barn door or crash hole is visible. Echoing some of the witness accounts from 9/11, Old Man Peabody looks at the DeLorean and says, "Looks like an aeroplane, without wings." His son retorts, "That ain't no airplane, look." One or two people have suggested to me that the pattern of Old Man Peabody's shotgun blast in the barn door resembles the numbers 9, 1, or possibly 9/11. Remember also that the DeLorean should have crashed into the 1955 Hill Valley movie theatre during the finale of the first film, were it not for the time travel effect temporarily displacing the resulting crash to 1985. It's been speculated that whatever was flown into the Twin Towers on 9/11 was remotely guided. Coincidentally or not, the first time travel test of the DeLorean at the Twin Pines Mall is guided by use of a remote control device. No one is internally driving the vehicle, which also disappears during the test. On another related note, the official narrative of 9/11 often muddles the effect that plane impacts and explosions might have on partial steel construction, such as that used in the Twin Towers. More accurately, Dr. Judy Wood has compiled evidence showing some of the effects that the directed energy technology deployed on 9/11 had on the building's steel. In Back to the Future Part 1, Marty asks Doc about the construction of the time machine. Doc replies, "The stainless steel construction makes the flux dispersal." The return of the vehicle from its first jaunt through time interrupts this reveal, and we need nothing more on the subject. Number 2. The storm. Discussing the part that Hurricane Erin may have played in the process used to dustify the Twin Towers on 9/11, we cannot ignore the thematic role that the 1955 Hill Valley lightning storm has in Marty's return journey to 1985. It is the energy from this storm that powers the DeLorean's flux capacitor, making the whole process possible. Bizarrely, Hurricane Erin went largely unreported in pre-9/11 weather forecasts.
What's happening with weather conditions around the nation? We start with the high temperatures for today. It is going to be a warm one in the south, but these temperatures are pretty much seasonable for most of the nation. 70s in the upper Midwest. We'll see some 80s throughout much of the U.S. Desert Southwest, of course, over 100 degrees again. Take a look at the highlights for today. New York City, beautiful day here. 80 degrees today. St. Louis, 83. Albuquerque, you're looking at 87. San Diego, a pleasant 74. Where will we see rain? We'll see some scattered showers in portions of the west. Most of the west will be dry. Look for possible flooding in southern Texas, central and southern Florida, where the rain will be heavy. That's a look at what's happening with the weather around the nation. Now, here's what's happening in your neighborhood.
Good morning. Certainly no rain here. Nothing but dry skies. Next chance for rain not even until Thursday afternoon with a slight chance of a shower. Today and tomorrow mostly sunny, highs in the upper 70s and low 80s. Thursday could see a slight chance of a shower and then smooth sailing once again.
All right, thank you, Marta. 67 degrees. We've warmed up 3 in the last hour, but it's still cooler than it was yesterday. Yesterday it was 75. Northwest wind at 9. They will remain out of the northwest and north throughout the day today and tomorrow. That means humidity level, look at this, 73%. It was up to about 88% early this morning, so that's going to continue to fall. Gorgeous weather today and for the next several days. Rain yesterday afternoon, now well offshore, just a little bit making its way off the Outer Banks. No rain today or tomorrow. Cloud cover, too, with that cold front is making its way offshore, too. So we're going to have just a beautiful day today. This is a real cold front, folks. That means it's a boundary line of the very cool, dry air, and it is going to make its way well offshore, help to push Hurricane Aaron up to the north. It's not going to affect us at all, but high pressure. And this is just the beginning because another cold front moves in Thursday night, could trigger a round of shower activity, but drops the temperatures even more. Just gorgeous for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Low 70s. The average high is 82. We're not going to have it for about the next 5 to 7 days. Michael, over.
Around the country, kids, on this Tuesday, the night of the Latin Grammys. Sunny skies down through Texas, all the way from the bottom of Texas to the top of North Dakota. Little rain to the right of North Dakota. Parts of North Dakota may see a little rain. To the west of the country, no problem. To the east of the country, no problems except down in Florida, a little rain. Northeast, we'll see little rough seas along the New England coastline from that hurricane that's going away. Miles and miles of sunshine. Miles Davis. We're going to put Miles out there today. Nice as it can be across the Northeast. Rough seas still from the chop from that hurricane, but other than that, it's kind of quiet around the country. We like quiet. It's quiet. It's too quiet. That's a quick look at the Nashville forecast. Here's an early look at your weather.
Hi, everybody. I'm Hillary Howard. It is beautiful outside. Perfect September day with lots of sunshine. Oh, would you look at Washington, huh? I'm going outside today. Anyway, we're going to have a pretty day. Temperatures will be 77 to 82 degrees. Obviously, in higher elevations, it'll be just a little cooler. And then same thing tonight. Tonight, we'll see a wide disparity in terms of temperatures. 48 in the higher elevations, 60 down along the water. 7-day outlook looks sunny and dry, getting up to 81 today.
See here. That's what it would look like. Much better. Let's check your weather, see what's going on. For today, we've got a lot of cool weather in the northern states. We've got some hot weather continuing in the southwest and 80s as you get into the southeast with a lot of rain, up to 7 inches of rain in parts of Florida. Partly sunny in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle today, sunshine and 75. Sunny in the northeast and low humidity. Speaking of hair, what's the deal here?
Charles Worthington's big hair, girl.
Well, there you go. You certainly are. That's what's going on around the country. Here's what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Well, we've had a fresh, cool, dry air mass move in overnight. Good morning. I'm meteorologist Tom Kieran. We're up to 67 degrees here in Northwest and comfortably dry with a nice breeze coming in about 5 to 10 this morning. It may get a little gusty this afternoon, maybe 10 to 20 miles an hour with bright sunshine, highs reaching the low 80s. And we've got a cool evening on tap tonight. Ought to be widespread 50s for lows. And during the day tomorrow, the upper 70s for highs. Then Thursday, partly sunny. Could have a passing shower Thursday evening. Otherwise, dry weather all the way into the weekend.
Given that any and all weather is weather news, its absence from forecast sticks out like the proverbial sore thumb. Synchronistically, Doc and Marty discuss abnormal weather in the film, specifically lightning storms. Doc asks, "You never know when or where it's ever going to strike." This line also resonates with the overall 9/11 perception management psyop. With information about the future available to him, Doc becomes confident and factors the storm into the process that will send Marty back to 1985. He even goes as far as to say to Marty, "Don't worry, I'll take care of the lightning." Is there a synchronicity here with the process that took care of Hurricane Erin on 9/11, most notably in dramatically altering its original heading for New York? Number 3. Is it hot? There were numerous heat and fire anomalies on 9/11. In the title of Chapter 13 of Where Did the Towers Go?, Dr. Judy Wood terms the phenomenon weird fires, fires without heat, heat without fires. In Back to the Future Part 1 there is a scene where the DeLorean appears in a flash of light after its time travel test drive. The audience's expectation of heat is subliminally embedded when the vehicle expels 2 large plumes of what look like steam from its rear-mounted reactor exhausts. Doc Brown then attempts to open the door of the vehicle and recoils his hand as if he's burnt it. Marty shouts, What, is it hot?" The Doctor replies, "It's cold, damn cold." The DeLorean's expulsion of steam also resonates in relation to 9/11. In a chapter on weird fires, Dr. Wood invalidates the claim of molten metal and raging fires beneath the rubble of 9/11. On this subject she also says, if there really is molten metal present in the raging fires beneath the rubble, then where are the steam explosions resulting from the water being applied? Similarly, if there were molten metal in the basements, more steam would be expected in wet weather rather than in dry weather, but that was not the case. The case is very clear. If there really were temperatures high enough to produce molten metal for weeks, especially if water were added into the mix, it would have been deadly for any people to have been near those sites, let alone directly on them. Number 4. This sucker's nuclear. There are researchers who misleadingly theorise about the use of nuclear weaponry on 9/11. The term mini-nukes is often bandied about certain internet forums. Although these notions are again evidentially dispelled by the research of Dr. Judy Wood, some of these nukes on 9/11 people have synchronised 9/11 and Back to the Future, emphasising references to nuclear atomic power in the film. These include the DeLorean's initial use of plutonium, the 1955 Hill Valley movie theatre playing the film The Atomic Kid, young Doc Brown's throwaway reference to all the fallout from the atomic wars, Marty's radiation suit, and so on. However, I do not believe that these references connect to 9/11 in a way that they are being portrayed by certain researchers. Superficially, these atomic and nuclear themes do touch base with 50s Cold War paradigm and the narrative timeframe of the first film, and the original ending of the film, which would have seen Doc Brown utilising the energy from an atomic bomb test to power Marty's return journey to 1985. Although, according to the producers, the film's original ending was changed because of the production costs. I find this shift in emphasis from nuclear to electrical energy most revealing. On a deeper level, there is some key dialogue in the film when we first witness the time machine.
Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
Hey, keep rolling there. No, this sucker's electrical. But I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity I need.
In the scene, Doc Brown actually notes the emphasis on electrical rather than nuclear energy. I'm far from an academic when it comes to certain scientific principles, and usually only understand the generics of physics, chemistry and the like. However, I would propose that the energy-generating properties described by Doc Brown in Back to the Future Part 1 is akin to some form of low-energy nuclear reaction, LENR, what is misleadingly now often referred to in terms such as cold fusion. I must stress that despite any nuclear connotations, this process is very different from the way energy is generated in a traditional nuclear reactor or explosion. In her book Where Did the Towers Go?, Dr. Wood discusses cold fusion, low-energy nuclear reactions, and chemically assisted nuclear reaction. She says, there exists a process which, 1. Produces excess energy, 2. Causes transmutation of chemicals, 3. Forms tritium, 4. Generates a magnetic precipitate, 5. Occurs at room temperature, and 6. Does all this without producing radioactivity. Dr. Wood adds, tritium was identified in samples taken from a WTC storm sewer and from the basement of WTC 6, 3 days and 10 days respectively after the 9/11 events. Tritium is a radioactive form of hydrogen that is used in research, fusion reactors and neutron generators. She concludes, if a nuclear bomb had been used to destroy the World Trade Center, radiation from it would have been detected around the world, and there also would have been a seismic signature, and again, the order of magnitudes of tritium resulting from the various processes suggests the same conclusion. As shown in Table 19, the amount of tritium found in a sample from WTC-6 is approximately 50 times the background level. The tritium measured in a cold fusion cell is 50 times greater than that. The amount of tritium found in the groundwater from a leaky nuclear power plant is 360 times that in a cold fusion cell, or 18,000 times what was measured in a sample from the World Trade Center. At the start of Back to the Future Part 1, the catalyst for the time travel process is electrical energy generated by a nuclear reaction, the use of plutonium in this case. At the climax of the film, Doc Brown returns from the year 2015 with a revamped time machine and the plutonium chamber replaced with a device mechanism called Mr. Fusion Home Energy Reactor. We can assume that Mr. Fusion is effectively a free energy device based on Doc Brown emptying the contents of a trash can into Mr. Fusion while saying, "I need fuel." It is confirmed in Back to the Future Part 3 that Mr. Fusion powers the DeLorean's flux capacitor and timer circuits, although strangely not the car's engine, which remains a gasoline petrol-fueled combustion engine. In this regard, Doc Brown truly lives up to the caricature of the absent-minded professor. He travels to the future and installs Mr. Fusion free energy device to generate at least 1.21 gigawatts of electrical energy to power the electrical components of the car's mechanism. He also installs a presumably electrical-powered hover conversion capability. Yet he totally overlooks the installation of, at the very least, an electrical motor for the car's on-road propulsion requirements, which would have allowed Mr. Fusion to power all aspects of the car and remove the engine's fossil fuel dependency. Doc Brown's modifications are, to borrow a metaphor, akin to somebody buying a cell phone to make phone calls but using a carrier pigeon to send text messages. I should point out, of course, that the science of Back to the Future films doesn't really need to make sense. They are, after all, only films. The oversight is actually, to use the Hollywood jargon, plot MacGuffin to strand Doc and Marty in 1885 in Part 3 of the trilogy. Had Mr. Fusion powered every aspect of the car, then the final film in the trilogy would probably have been about 25 minutes long. Digging a little deeper, it may be that there were potentially more cryptic reasons as to why the film's writers placed contrived limitations on the free energy concept, especially in light of the significant connections between Back to the Future and the free energy aspects of 9/11. These connections were fortuitously exposed by Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis in a question and answer session recorded at the University of Southern California Film School. The interviewer in the Q&A session was Lauren Bogereau, the Disc Extras producer on the 2005 DVD release of the trilogy box set.
One of the end sequences with Doc in the car uses fusion. It is a contemporary concept now, but how did you know about it then?
Fuel cells. Yeah, well, you know, we knew about that. We read about that.
Fusion was something that everybody's been experimenting with, and in fact, I think about 6 or 8 months after the movie came out, it was when those scientists in Utah claimed that they had figured out cold fusion. And that was all over the news for 4 or 5 months until nobody could replicate those experiments, and turned out those guys just didn't know what they were doing. But we actually got a letter from the Defense Department when the movie came out. They wanted to know, what did we know about fusion power? Very scary, kids. Very
This is how
scary.
the government. That's how it works.
In the interview, Gale and Zemeckis are asked about the Mr. Fusion plot device and how they knew about fusion power. They say they'd read about things like fuel cells and presumably other forms of energy production. They then reference the research of Stanley Pons and Martin Fleischmann and the phenomenon known as cold fusion. We obviously know this based on Gale's references to cold fusion and scientists in Utah, whose research was all over the news for 4 or 5 months. Fleischmann and Pons spent over 5 years and $100,000 of their own money on cold fusion research in 1989. They conducted experiments in Pons' laboratory in the Henry Eyring Chemistry Building at the University of Utah. Bob Gale refers to the time frame of about 6 or 8 months after the movie came out, when they became aware of the Pons and Fleischmann research. We must assume that they are referring to Back to the Future Part 2, because about 6 or 8 months after the movie came out does tally with the announcements of Pons and Fleischmann's research, although their initial announcement was actually in March 1989. I suspect that Gale was slightly mistaken in his recollection of this time period, and more likely meant 6 or 8 months before the film's release. Consider that Back to the Future 2 was released in late 1989. Principal photography began in February 1989, and the free energy aspects of Mr. Fusion were clearly established in the released film, meaning that they must have known about the research before the film came out and not after. There is another interesting addendum worth adding here. The Mr. Fusion device, how it essentially worked, and the label Mr. Fusion Home Energy Reactor are all demonstrated and clearly visible in the climax of the first Back to the Future film, which was released in 1985. This curiously coincides with when Pons and Fleischmann began their research at the University of Utah, but several years before their research was announced to the public. If this is purely coincidental, then we can only assume that Gale and Zemeckis extrapolated the initial Mr. Fusion device and process, as science fiction future predictions often do, from mundane, mainstream scientific discussions of more traditional nuclear fusion processes, known at least 70 years before the making of Back to the Future trilogy. If not, then where did Gale and Zemeckis gain their knowledge? I'm not implying anything sinister by asking this question, but it is a question we should ask nevertheless. Before I continue, it's worth highlighting a few points about the dynamic duo of the Back to the Future franchise, Gale and Zemeckis. Robert Zemeckis had a number of questionable cinematic associations during his film career. He directed, amongst other films, Contact, which received substantial US military support during production, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is one of those notorious Disney films loaded with odd symbolism and containing at least one subliminal insert of a sexual nature. Zemeckis' Image Movers digital company created CGI animated films using performance capture technology and functioned for several years under the exclusive aegis of Disney. Bob Gale is something of an elusive quantity. The majority of articles about Gale that exist on the internet give sparse information about his life, upbringing, education and career. This is a little odd given that Gale established himself in the Hollywood industry in the mid-late 1970s and worked with a number of Hollywood high-uppers, such as Steven Spielberg, but I digress at this point. In the aforementioned Back to the Future DVD interview, Bob Gale dismisses the research of Pons and Fleischmann, saying that nobody could replicate those experiments, and it turned out those guys just didn't know what they were doing. Gale's statements are untrue. For example, several teams of researchers reproduced some or all of the effects Pons and Fleischmann had seen and measured, such as John Bockris, who was working at Texas A&M University. Gale's statement highlights some important points, namely how mass perceptions are affected by what is shown in movies, and by extension, the views of those people like Gale and Zemeckis who are associated with the movie industry. People will often readily accept Hollywood perceptions of reality over those in scientific journals. Gale's dismissal echoes the scientific reception that Pons and Fleischmann received upon making their research findings available to the public. This also ties into another figure with substantial connections to cold fusion and 9/11, Dr. Stephen E. Jones of Brigham Young University. Jones was involved with cold fusion research at the same time as Pons and Fleischmann. He also worked specifically in the field of muon-catalyzed cold fusion. It's worth noting that this muon-catalyzing cold fusion research was not a study of free energy, it was rather a study of the alternatives to the traditional nuclear fusion process.
First off, will you, just for the listeners that don't know who you are, give us your background, some of the publications you've written for,
Sure.
Some of the research you've done?
Sure. Well, let's go back to graduate school. I was a graduate student in physics, got my PhD from Vanderbilt. Did most of my research, though, at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, and finished up my coursework at Stanford since I was out there doing the research. What else? And then I did postdoctoral work at Cornell and, Los Alamos National Lab. So, I've been around the block a few times. I have a publication in Scientific American with a dear friend of mine, Johann Rafelsky. That was back in 1987, July. You want to look that up? The title of our article is Cold Nuclear Fusion. Yes, that's correct. We're talking there about muon-catalyzed fusion. It was just a lot of fun. For a number of years, I was the principal investigator for the Department of Energy on this study of muon-catalyzed fusion.
Jones once claimed that he and a colleague coined the name cold fusion.
Well, then now you've also conducted experiments with regard to cold fusion, right? Now, what's cold fusion?
Okay, well, first of all, muon-catalyzed fusion occurs just fine at room temperature. That is, in room temperature gases of these hydrogen isotopes. So we used to call it cold fusion all the time. But then there's what's commonly called cold fusion now, was so named by myself and a colleague at BYU, Paul Palmer. And this is fusion that occurs in metals. In other words, certain metals, this was our hypothesis, can enhance the fusion rate.
He also stated that he told Martin Fleischmann that he and Stan Pons should not call their process fusion. Fleischmann, in the documentary Cold Fusion Fire from Water, stated,
and of course we didn't call it cold fusion at all. That was a term which was wished on us, but we never called it that. We felt the processes had to be nuclear to account for the high levels of the energy per atom.
Jones was highly instrumental in influencing a vote regarding the validity of Pons and Fleischmann's research. This vote essentially killed further research and turned much of the scientific academic community against the idea that this phenomenon really could be exploited as a cheap, clean energy source. Notably, Jones worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory and for the Department of Energy. Now consider that these processes involved in the cold fusion phenomenon appear to be related to processes which took place during the destruction of the World Trade Center complex on 9/11, as documented in Dr. Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go? Then consider that Dr. Stephen E. Jones has occupied a lofty and influential position in the so-called 9/11 Truth Movement Limited Hangout. On countless occasions he has falsely attempted to connect the destruction of the World Trade Center complex to the likes of controlled demolition and thermite, as documented in Andrew Johnson's book 9/11 Finding the Truth, and in numerous articles on his website Check the Evidence. Jones was also instrumental in attempting to deter 9/11 research community from looking at the evidence gathered by Dr. Judy Wood in her book, for example by referring to the energy weapon evidence as being related to space beams.
Dr. Wood says maybe there's a beam of laser or microwave from space or something that came down, and she says instead of thermites. Well, I'm saying, look, there's a lot of evidence for thermite, and on the other hand, some exotic laser or maser beam. I'm one that's open to suggestion, but boy, there better be some pretty good evidence, you know. And I haven't, it looks to me like the thermite explanation fits the data quite well, and so that's where I stand on that. But plus the fact that it takes a lot of energy. If you're sending a beam of laser from space, you've got to have an enormous energy source in space to do that. And that's been looked at. It's tough. It's a tough problem. It's almost ruled out there. I don't think we have such a weapon, thank goodness.
Given his past and associations, it seems clear why Jones has gone out of his way to redirect people away from, while simultaneously attempting to discredit the evidence of directed free energy technology on 9/11. The synchronicities with Stephen E. Jones and 9/11 Back to the Future are a little disconcerting. With Jones, we have a man who has researched and helped to muddle and cover up research into free energy technology, and a man who has helped to steer mass perceptions of the events of 9/11. With Back to the Future Part 1, we have a film which highlights free energy technology and seemingly foreshadows 9/11, possibly even misdirecting mass perceptions of 9/11. Coincidence, anyone? Perhaps not. Another connection between Back to the Future, 9/11 and the directed free energy technology, albeit a little tenuous, comes courtesy of the appearance of a certain individual in the short-lived Back to the Future animated series. The show, which aired in the latter part of 1991 and throughout 1992, included short live-action sections featuring Christopher Lloyd reprising his role as Doc Brown. These segments were educational inserts used to inform young viewers about real-world science. In these segments, Lloyd is aided by a scientific assistant, played by none other than Bill Nye, the science guy. Nye graduated Cornell University in 1977, just as Stephen E. Jones commenced postdoctoral research there. Nye has had several decade-long associations with, as well as being the current CEO of the Planetary Society. The Planetary Society is supposedly dedicated to promoting nothing but space exploration. However, they have expressed views on, and written articles about, many subjects outside of this remit, including peddling mainstream disinformation about 9/11. By their own admission, the Planetary Society is, amongst others, heavily sponsored by Underwriters Laboratories. This brings me to the research of Dr. Judy Wood again. The following is taken from Andrew Johnson's article, 9/11 Ketam Case filed in the US Supreme Court. In 2005, a number of reports were issued by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which are the result of a study mandated by Congress to determine why and how World Trade Center 1 and World Trade Center 2 collapsed. In April 2007, Dr. Wood, with the help of a Connecticut attorney, Jerry Liepard, lodged a Ketam complaint against some of the contractors NIST employed to produce these reports. This complaint followed an earlier request for correction with regard to the same NIST WTC reports, establishing her as the first to address the fact that this report did not even contain an analysis of the collapse of the World Trade Center towers. These cases involve Dr. Judy Wood as the plaintiff relator on behalf of the people of the United States of America versus a number of defendants. One of the latter, heavily involved with the NIST report and thusly the cover-up of the evidence of directed free energy technology on 9/11, was Underwriters Laboratories. For full details about Dr. Wood's Keytown complaint and requests for correction, I recommend visiting the links below. Free energy technology is at the heart of the 9/11 subject, just as it appears to place the metaphorical cherry on the cake of the first Back to the Future film. In a world of easily available free energy technology, there would be no need for fossil fuels, gasoline, nuclear power plants, and all of the other trappings that come with them. For example, the use of oil for petrol cars would be a thing of the past. In this regard, I find the imagery, themes, and dialogue of the Back to the Future trilogy very telling. In the words of Doc Brown, roads, where we're going we don't need roads. There is one final section relating to Back to the Future that deserves mention in light of fairly recent events. It's wholly speculative on my part and could easily be dismissed by others as lacking any substantive evidence at this point. However, I've always trusted my gut instincts when researching these subjects, and something tells me that it's right to connect these few extra dots. I encourage you to make up your own mind on the matter. In September 2015, I was made aware of a fascinating film called Shill Bill, which looks at predictive programming in the media and also examines the quite compelling indications that Alex Jones and Bill Hicks, legendary alternative and controversial comedian, are one and the same person. Leaving this subject aside, the producer of Shill Bill, Dusty Westfield, states his belief that the Back to the Future films predict not one, but multiple false flag events. It would be fair to say that the first is September the 11th, 2001. Dusty Westfield suggests that the clues indicate the second would take place on the 10th, 4th, 16. To fully understand how he came to this conclusion, please watch the film. Before I go any further, remember that Shill Bill was first posted on Polarization Nation Media's YouTube account on August the 26th, 2015. Obviously nothing out of the ordinary happened on the 10th of April 2016. Therefore, I'm assuming that Dusty Westfield is using the American calendar dating system, month, then day, then year, as opposed to the UK system of day, month and year. Given that I'm recording this piece in July 2016, I have to wait and see if anything occurs in October 2016. Irrespective of this vagueness, I'm still open to the possibility that films like the Back to the Future trilogy may well have foreshadowed more than at least one false flag event. Shill Bill observes the occult mystery school inversion techniques to decode the Back to the Future films, with the primer being the scene screen upside-down perspective of George McFly in the second film of the trilogy. As noted earlier, this pivotal scene presents the WTC Twin Towers on the scene screen window, but also includes a Statue of Liberty lamp in each of the shots. The lamp is made of the head and torch arm portions of the statue only. Let's have a brief look at the history of the Statue of Liberty, also known as Liberty Enlightening the World. It was first designed by French sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi and built by Gustave Eiffel, who also built Paris's central iconic landmark, the Eiffel Tower. Bartholdi completed the head and the torch-bearing arm before the statue was fully designed. Those pieces were exhibited for publicity at international expositions. It was a joint project between the French and American people. The French built the statue and the Americans the pedestal. The statue's head was exhibited at the Paris World's Fair throughout 1878. Bartholdi's skin sections and the components of the statue's internal pylon tower, built in the Eiffel factory, were constructed in Paris. The point I'm highlighting here is that although readily associated with New York, the Paris-France connection with the statue is crucial and often overlooked. The events in the Statue of Liberty scene screen living room are set in 2015 and synchronised with the start of the film's central plot device, the acquisition of Gray's Sports Almanac, an old French term by the way, almanac, by Old Biff Tannen. Old Biff takes his book of future sports results back to his younger self in 1955. Old Biff arrives on Saturday the 12th of November, gives young Biff the almanac, and departs for 2015. All of the key events of the second film in the trilogy are triggered in 2015. They revolve around the recovery of the almanac and culminate on November 12th, 1955. In 1955, Marty pursues what he thinks is the sports almanac. At one point, he realises he's been tracking a fake, this being a key word in this context, a fake version of the almanac. Young Biff takes the dust jacket from a genuine copy and wraps it around a fake, and yet again French, periodical. In this case, a copy of Ooh La La, the French magazine featuring lingerie models. The inside pages, the price and the number of ooh la la were taken from a real French magazine called Paris Sex Appeal. The 2015 almanac plotline is concluded when Marty wakes up on the morning of November the 13th, as seen at the very beginning of Back to the Future Part 3. Is it possible that another potentially false flag event date, other than 9/11 or Dusty Westfield's date of 10/4/16, has been foreshadowed in Back to the Future 2, and that event date is the Paris attacks on November the 13th, 2015? Is there a synchronicity with the Paris events coming mere weeks after Back to the Future Day, the 30th anniversary celebrations? On a final note, I wonder if there may be another minor synchronicity with Robert Zemeckis' October 2015 film The Walk, given that the nationality of the WTC high-wire walker Philippe Petit is French, and that he performed similar high-wire stunts in Paris. In 1971 he walked between the towers of Notre Dame Cathedral, in 1983 at the Centre Georges Pompidou, in 1984 at performances of the Chord Rain Piano Volant and Paris Opera, and in 1989 to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution. The wire walk cable between the ground at the Palace de Trocadero and the second level of the Eiffel Tower also took place in these events. It certainly seems that the Paris attacks were yet another example of a false flag event, based on contradictory accounts, the number of odd coincidences before the events, terror drills being carried out on the same date at the same location as the attacks, and so on. There's obviously a precedent for this conclusion if one studies 9/11 closely enough, but also when we look at other so-called terrorist events that occurred as a result of the West's proverbial war on terror. Remember, of course, that the war on terror was triggered by 9/11.